Okay, well, aloha and welcome to our speaker series hosted by the South Kohala Coastal Partnership. My name is Blair Langston. I'm with the Nature Conservancy. So before I introduce our speakers today, I'd like to give a quick introduction to the South Kohala Coastal Partnership itself, so you can get a glimpse of the big picture work that we do and see how our presenters' work fits within the context of the entire network. So you may be wondering why South Kohala. Hawaii Island is a big island, and why would we choose to focus on this region? Well, this region was in fact designated as a priority area in 2010 by the Division of Aquatic Resources. So what this means is that South Kohala was identified as an area that had substantial and important coral reefs, but they are also under threat from anthropogenic stressors, including sediment, sewage, unsustainable fisheries, and climate change. So the state saw this as an opportunity to make progress on these very complicated and cross-cutting issues by building a network of partners to tackle these things together in one geography. So what is a coastal partnership exactly? You may be familiar with watershed partnerships that exist across the state, where major landowners collaborate to preserve and protect forests and habitats that span across their boundaries. But when we think about applying that model to the ocean, it doesn't quite work the same, since we don't have the same ownership structure in the ocean. So instead, we work with different stakeholders who have something at stake with our ocean resources. So this includes entities such as community groups, government agencies, nonprofit organizations, various other organizations, businesses, researchers, resource managers, and also landowners. At the latest count, we had a total of 71 partner organizations involved in the network. Collectively, our vision is a restored, healthy, abundant, resilient South Kohala coastal system, cared for and cherished by an island community guided by the values and traditions of South Kohala. Prioritizing action. The network has gone through an iterative planning process to prioritize our actions that will address impacts to our coastal waters. In our most recent plan, we identified 6 key strategies to focus on. So these 6 strategies are the Resilient Ocean Policy, which aims to support community-based fisheries management. We have Soil and Watershed Management, which aims to reduce erosion and sedimentation that affects our coral reefs. Our Clean Water Management Strategy aims to address other pollution that affects coral reefs, including sewage, fertilizer, and also anything coming through the groundwater. Our county and community planning strategy, where we work closely with the county and specifically the planning department to provide science that could inform their planning efforts. The community connectivity and stewardship strategy, which aims to preserve and enhance the community's connection to place and foster community stewardship and partnerships with community and community-based organizations. And last but not least, our climate threat assessment and response strategy, which aims to continue to track the latest research and modeling of climate change impacts in South Kohala and to adjust our other strategies as needed. So the structure of the network is formatted so that each of these strategies has a team of partners dedicated to implementing them. And so you may see that communicating is extremely important. And we need to communicate within and across the network in a couple ways. So the speaker series is just one of our ways to do that. Also, with a network of over 70 partners, it can become challenging to effectively communicate to all of our partners and to the community what everyone is working on simultaneously. So with that, we are continuing our speaker series to connect the work of our partners with the community and across the network, and in order to take a deeper dive on their work. Before we get started, I did want to highlight a few housekeeping requests. If everyone could keep themselves on mute during the talk, we will open it up for a discussion afterwards. And during the talk, feel free to put burning questions in the chat and we will address those first. When we open up for questions and discussion at the end, we would love to be able to see your faces if you're able to use your camera. If you have connection issues, no worries. And we will be recording the talk to share it with those who missed it. So with that in mind, please be respectful of all participants. So today we have Mahina Patterson and Jake Merkel with the Kohala Center who are here to share with us their work. So Mahina and Jake, I will pass it over to you.
Mai honoke'a a kia hua lono na palana ho'i o nei aina aloha o Kohala, aloha kākou. From honoke'a to kia hua lono, the boundaries of this beloved land, Kohala, aloha everyone. My name is Mahina Patterson, and I am fortunate to have been raised here in Waimea, Kohala. And it is, as we all know, such a beautiful place that really instilled in me a deep sense of aloha. And it really was my childhood experiences of climbing pu'u and playing in streams and experiencing our forest that inspired me, that gave me this sense of aloha for this place that has fed and sustained me and has really driven me to where I am today, presenting to all of you as the Aina-based education specialist and Eke project manager with the Kohala Center. And I'll pass it over to Jake.
Aloha kākou, everyone. My name is Jake Merkel. I was first introduced to Kohala shortly after I graduated high school in Ke'au. I was very fortunate to find the beauty and abundant resources of Kohala at an early age. I now call Waimea home with my family, and I am sustained and my family sustained by the waters of Kohala. I think that if I could have it my way, I would always be connected to Kohala in some form or another. I don't ever plan on leaving this place, and I don't think this place ever plans on leaving me. Mahalo.
Okay, and this evening we will be sharing about our Eke project with you, protecting and sustaining source waters of Kohala. So at the Kohala Center, our stewardship work in the Wauakua, or the cloud forest of Kohala, is driven by this overarching question: how do we bring more water down the mountain in a pono way? And we turn to kilo, or personal direct observation, ike kupuna, or ancestral knowledge, and research to guide our actions. And so we can't talk about water without talking about Himele no Kane, or a chant for Kane, which is a traditional chant that was passed down mai kapo mai from the distant antiquity, mai nakupuna mai from the ancestors for the benefit of us today. And so I'd like us to begin by first listening to this chant. I'm going to make sure the volume is good. Okay. Ewi he nina, ewi akwana ya oi aiha kabaya kad. Aya ikahikina kala kuka ihai hai. Aya ilaila kabaya kad.
Ewiya wana ya oi ai ha kabaya kan. Ai kaula na kalai ka pai o puai ki pai. E a mai ana mani kua makamole mai o le kua. Ai I leila kabaya kan. Ewiya wana ya oi ai ha kabaya kan. Ai ke kua hivi, ke kua lono, ke awava, ka Hawaii. Ai I leila kabaya kan. Ewiya wana ya oi ai ha kabaya kan. Ai I kai, I ka moana, I ke kualau, ke a nue nue, I ka pūnahu, I ka ua koko, I ka a lava lava. Ai I leila kabaya kan. Ewiya wana ya oi ai ha kabaya kan. Ai I luna kabaya kan. Ke au uli, ke au ele ele, ke au pano pano, ke au po polokua mea kane lae. Ai I leila kabaya kan. Ewiya wana ya oi ai ha kabaya kan. Ai I lalo, I ka honua, I ka vai hu, I ka vai kaua kane me kanaloa. He vai puna, he vai inu, he vai emana, he vai eola noa.
So that was me and our Kohala stewardship intern, Ho'oipo Bertelman, chanting that this morning for you all. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to attend the presentation this evening. We would have loved to perform this chant for you and to share it with you in that way. But because she couldn't be here, this was our best way of being able to share this chant with you all. You may have noticed that there was this call and response going on. And so essentially the calling out is this question, Aya Ihya Kvaya Kane, or where is the water of Kane? And the response is answering that question. And eventually the chant takes you through the water cycle as it was understood by our ancestors and from a Hawaiian perspective. And so another way to think about this question that the composer of this chant is challenging the listeners with is where are your water sources, or where does your water come from? And this question is absolutely, as we all know, just as relevant to us today as it was at the time this chant was composed. Because as a community, we really need to remember where our water really comes from. And so the chant begins with the rising of the sun in the east and the setting of the sun in the west in the first and second verses. And in the third verse, it takes us to the tops of our mountains, which really is the first stop in water's journey. Aya ike kua hivi, ike kua lono, ike avava, ike ka Hawaii, aya ileila kawaya kane. Which means there in the mountain, the high ridges, there in the valley, the flowing stream, there is the water of Kane. And what's really significant about this verse again is that it is the first stop in water's journey in this chant, as I explained, which really highlights its importance, the importance of our kuahiwi, our mountains and the forests that are there in the water cycle, as our kupuna observed and saw it. And so Jake is going to take us through a dive into the role that our kuahiwi and our forests plays in our water cycle.
Mahalo, Mahina. I hope that some of you or most of you are familiar with the Kohala cloud forest, or a cloud forest. It's really a special place. It's incredible the amount of moisture that comes up from the ocean and travels upslope and condenses from the blowing trade winds and all that force coming uphill. That air, you know, it drives so hard upslope from the Pali by Waipio and Waimanu, Honolulu, and it comes upslope and it condenses and cools, and it creates these wonderful thick clouds. And they pass through beautiful lush forest and really collect on everything. Next slide, please. This area, it's designated as the Wauakua. It's a really incredible environment that doesn't have a lot of presence from animals, large mammals. There's a lot of very small creatures, a lot of small animals that are native to that place. But there's not a lot of presence from large animals like us and things like pigs. And I guess we'll get into that a little bit later. But basically, there's so much minute little details in this forest, and all of them collect this cloud mist rolling through. Everything is significant there. Everything is collecting and bringing that water out of the air and dripping it down to the ground and percolating through the ground into the aquifer and into the streams. It's like one big giant sponge. And it kind of feels like one too when you're up in the forest, when you're lucky enough to get out there and experience it. It's like you're walking through and on top of a giant sponge. It's absolutely amazing. Next slide, please. So, as I said, a large portion of the water that comes into the cloud forest and collects on organisms. And these are examples of akua that provide us the water and give us life. And I think Mahina wanted to touch on a few details of this.
Yes, so we have, this is not meant to be an exhaustive list, but kind of what we've learned so far in our journey in learning about our Wauakua, our cloud forest. We have Ohi'olehua, who is a kinolo, or a body form, a physical manifestation of Hina, Ku, and Laka. We also have Maile in the middle here, who is a kinolo of Laka, and Ohavai on the far right here, who is a kinolo of Uli. And collectively, the akua of our forests, of our Wauakua, are referred to as the kini akua, or the multitude of akua, which gives you an idea of as Jake is sharing, of all of the many different beings that live in our forests, that collect water, that give us life. And so again, the chant begins in the east. Hemela no Kane takes us to the west. And then from the mountain, which we just talked about, and down to the sea. And then it takes us to the sky and finally ends with this last verse in the earth. Aya ilalo, ika honua, ika vai hu, ika vai kaua kaneme kanaloa, he vai puna, he vai inu, he vai mana, he vai eola no ea. Below in the earth, the gushing spring, in the water set by Kane and Kanaloa, water springing forth, water to drink, water to empower, water to bring life, let it thrive indeed. And so we see in this last verse that it really brings this chant of our water cycle to a conclusion and tells us that our water ends up in our earth, in our groundwater aquifers that overflow as springs. And most significant, I think, about this verse is the very last line, the final conclusion, let it thrive indeed, which really provides us with instructions as drinkers of the water of Kohala, in terms of our kuleana, to ensure that this cycle continues here in Kohala for generations to come, but not only that it continues, but that it thrives. And so this is the intention behind our Eke project, with the goal of sustaining an important water source for Kohala by protecting the forested summit region surrounding Eke. You can see that here delineated in yellow. And the Eke project area encompasses the very top of the ahupua'a of Kauai Hikina, or Kauai 2, which you can see is highlighted in purple. And this aina was passed down by Queen Emma Kalaleona Lani and is stewarded today by Queen Emma Lands Company. And the Eke project area, which extends from the pasture forest boundary here to the summit of Komokale Ho'ohie, contains some of the highest quality forests remaining on Kohala Mountain.
Mahalo, Mahina. So some of the beauty has been seen so far, but we're starting to kind of veer off, and now we're going to start talking about a little bit of the challenges. So I just wanted to start off with this slide, and it's from a recent UH study. So according to this UH study, Kohala's water supply is under threat from the loss of the Valakua to non-native animals and plants like feral pigs and Himalayan ginger. An estimated 379 billion gallons of water and 193 billion gallons of groundwater recharge would be saved from the loss of over 50 years, would be saved from loss over 50 years with the stewardship of our vulnerable forests. And as you can see from the slide, there's, it's not very obvious, but those green and red blobs are North Kohala. And it's depicted on the right side, you can see a map and it shows the priority areas. So it's that north point of Kohala. I think most of you recognize that from being in conservation, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Next slide, please.
Oh, almost forgot it was my turn. So feral pigs, while culturally important, as we all know, are not native to the Valakua. And so we really wanted to spend some time diving deep into that and asking ourselves, well, if they're not native to the Valakua, how did they end up there in such great numbers that they're now impacting our Valakua? And so we put together this timeline that helps us to understand the history of pigs here, as well as the practice of hunting, pig hunting a little bit better. And so about over 500,000 years ago, Kohala Mountain is born, meaning that it comes out of the water and the summit area is dry. And so that is a very, very, very long time ago. And more recently, about 1,000 years ago, is when Polynesian people and Polynesian pigs arrive. And so we just want to reiterate that there really was such a great long span of time where the forest that develops on Kohala Mountain does not have pigs present within it. And it's really, again, within the last 1,000 years that we see both people and pigs arrive in this landscape. And then more recently, we see Captain James Cook arrives in 1778 and marks continual contact with the outside world here in Hawaii. And along with that very important event, we see the introduction of foreign varieties of pigs and introductions of all kinds that have influenced and impacted where we've ended up today. And so some of those additional introductions are food sources for pigs, such as strawberry guava and guava that are not native here. And I should back up. I realized I forgot to share that when pigs arrived here with Polynesians, they were domesticated and they were raised as food and kept within the wao kanaka, or within the human habitation zone, and fed the food crops that Polynesian people also brought with them. And so they were really, really dependent on people, which limited them and their expansion to within the the Valkanaka. And as you can imagine, it's not, it would be very difficult to have a productive agricultural system if pigs are allowed to roam freely. And so that, so again, the practice, that husbandry practice of raising pigs close to home in fenced pens or papua was the practice of that time period. And then I'll kind of jump back to where I was with the arrival of Captain James Cook and all of the introductions that came. It really was the introduction of food sources like earthworms and like the fruiting plants that I described, as well as the introduction of these larger pigs that had a greater reproductive potential, that allowed feral pigs to then expand across the landscape. We also see the introduction of land ownership, major changes that come along with that as well as the introduction of the practice of hunting itself and the tools needed. I should clarify that, the practice of pig hunting and the tools needed to hunt pigs, like metal knives, guns, and even hunting dogs. Although there were dogs in Hawaii, the Polynesian dog, that particular dog was a food source and was also raised similarly to pigs in an animal husbandry relationship. And so really with all of these introductions, we see in the 1850s, this shift from an animal husbandry relationship between Hawaiians and pigs to a hunter-prey relationship, which has led us to where we are today, where we have the contemporary practice of pig hunting. So I just want to reiterate, if I wasn't clear, that really a couple of the points we wanted to make here was the movement or the expansion of pigs from the Valkanaka to the Valakua, and with that, the change of the practices of the people of this place from animal husbandry to the practice of pig hunting. And that's not to say that the contemporary practice of pig hunting is not Hawaiian or is not important. But what we really want to share is that it's important that we understand how that came to be, and that we take an honest look at the historical events that have led us to where we are today, with pigs again in our Valakua impacting our forests. And Jake will speak to that some more after this slide. And so this slide is just to, I'll go through it quickly, is just to reiterate something you've probably been hearing us say, the idea of Valakua and Valkanaka. You might be wondering what that is. And so most of us are familiar with the ahupua'a as being a significant aspect of Hawaiian resource management. And that is a vertical division, as well as the moku or the district. And so but beyond these vertical divisions, there were also these horizontal zones. And so I just want to highlight the Valakua and the Valkanaka, the Valakua being the very tops of our mountain that was designated as a sacred place for our akua, those things that provide us with life and provide us with the things that we need to live, like water and medicine. And that area is set aside and protected and treated differently and interacted with differently than the Valkanaka, which is the place of human habitation, where things like agriculture and the raising of pigs is going on. And it may be a little confusing. I just want to make sure that you all know that the figure on the left is not from the same source as the figure on the right. So the colors do not match one another. So I apologize for that confusion. But I did want to make sure to include the figure on the right, which comes from our very own Kamwela Plunkett, as well as Holly Mickeldani, who used Boundary Commission testimonies and other historical sources to map the major vegetation zones in our region in the early historic period. And so you can see that practice of VAO, or that result of Hawaiian resource management in the landscape here. And you can also see that the Ohia rainforest is like the Valakua, maintained and managed there at the very top of our mountain in our region.
So as we all know, we have a lot of pigs in Hawaii, and there's no elevational limit there, as far as on Kohala Mountain at least. I've seen, very heavy pig damage up near the summit of Kohala, Kaumu, Kaleho Ohie, and way down near the coastline in Pololu, all the way up to the water's edge in Waimanu. They're widespread, they're abundant. They really prefer a lot of our native species as food. And as you can see from the image on the left, that's a hapu'u fern that has been devoured. The starchy core of that hapu'u has been eaten. And on the image of the right, that's pa'inu. That is a species that is usually only found up off the ground in areas where there's pigs, because it's one of the first species that get eaten up. And they're normally in an area that doesn't have pigs. They're normally covering the ground in some places. So I just wanted to point that out. Next slide, please. So another image of hapu'u. And as you can see, it's the same sort of situation, except this hapu'u was eaten in a way that created a space for water to collect and for stagnant water to breed mosquitoes. And it's just a really nasty little environment that mosquitoes love. And one of the big problems with that is mosquitoes spread many diseases that kill our native forest birds. And we don't have a lot of forest bird habitat left in Hawaii. And so mosquitoes are a huge problem, and they're pretty terrible. So, one of the drawbacks of pigs is obviously they're destroying native forests, and you don't think, well, what's happening to the native birds because of that? Well, they're losing some forests, but at the same time, they're not only losing forests, but they're getting attacked by something that the pigs are helping to spread. They're helping to spread mosquitoes and all the diseases. So it's like a two birds with one stone kind of thing. It's really terrible. So next slide, please. So this slide just shows some other kinds of pig damage. On the left, you can see a pig wallow, and the pig wallows in some situations that serve the same kind of it's the same bad situation as a hapu'u that collects water after being eaten. It's a big mud puddle that can attract mosquitoes to thrive in, and it also really contributes to erosion and also the spread of weeds. Weeds often need disturbed areas to get a foothold, and big wallowed areas expose light and bare ground, and those weed species just thrive there, because a lot of our native species take a lot longer to germinate and to grow. So the weed species come in and grow rapidly. The photo on the right is what used to be 100% native forest, and now all the vegetation that used to be on the ground, all the moss, all the native ferns, all the little small keiki seedlings that were there have just been wiped out, completely wiped out. It's bare soil. In big rain events, all that vegetation that used to be there would slow the water down, and the water could drip down through the soil and through the root systems of all those species. But without all that vegetation, the water just slides overland and ends up in our streams, ends up in our reefs, and it's also a pretty bad situation. Next slide, please. So this image kind of shows some of the erosion happening. Image on the left is, you can see the trunks of these trees exposed, and underneath that big pond there, in a natural native forest, that wouldn't be standing water. That would be water that's percolating down through the root systems and into our groundwater to recharge our aquifer. But instead, it's ponding because of all the vegetation that was lost. Now it's just mud, and mud is really good at trapping water, and it acts as a reservoir, basically. To the right, same photo, or another photo kind of showing the same thing, just erosion happening. The water's not clear and pristine. It's got a lot of sediment suspended in that water. So just speaking to some of the other things that pigs do to our native forests in Kohala. Next slide, please. And then, so this set of photos is kind of focusing in on some weed species that have taken foothold. And once established, they're extremely hard to get rid of. And you'll basically not be able to get it back to 100% native forest once these weed species are established and covering up a whole area. It's basically what you really just don't want in a native forest. You don't want to end up with weed species just going crazy and trying to reconvert back to native forest. You're going to be putting in a lot of effort and a lot of resources, a lot of money, and you're better off spending that money protecting what we have left. And so the image on the left is strawberry guava. It's you can see a couple, maybe ohia tree trunks that are kind of larger in the middle of the photo, and then the rest is mostly strawberry guava and some ginger, some Himalayan ginger coming up. And then the photo on the right is a banana poca seedling just sprouting up, and you can see some fecal matter from some pigs over there that probably, that's probably where the weed seeds were when they germinated. The pigs love to eat that banana poca. So, all right, next slide, please. So yet another thing, another negative. I hate to be the negative guy, but another negative thing is feral pigs are really good at damaging the root systems and the bark of our beloved ohia trees. And when they damage that bark, it opens up a wound where things like ceratocystis, are what causes rapid ohia death, can take hold, spread through the tree, and just go crazy, and it wipes out big portions of our ohia forest. We've seen pu'u that are not fenced off at all, that are running rampant with pigs all through them. And you go walking through that forest, and it's hard to find an ohia tree that hasn't been affected by, tusking, rubbing, even trampling of the root systems. And so, it really just goes to show that huge sections of forest are being affected by heavy pig traffic and pig damage. And once a tree is infected with something like ceratocystis, it acts as a breeding ground for that, and it's going to keep spreading through the forest. It's like a disease within the forest, not only within the tree. And yeah, next slide, please. So this slide, it shows maps that kind of provide a time series sequence of suspect rapid ohia death ohia trees in Kohala. The amount of the white dead trees has greatly increased from December of 2017 to December of 2020. New research by Ryan Peroy and others show significant differences in areas with and without hooved animals, suggesting that hooved animal exclusion is an effective management tool to lessen the impacts of rapid ohia death. And next slide, please. So we spoke to Himalayan ginger briefly. but I want to make a point that it is extremely aggressive. It's also called Kahili ginger after the feather standards that the Hawaiians used to make. It's an extremely aggressive invader. It has a lot of seeds. Non-native birds often spread those seeds. They love shady areas. They love sunny areas and everything in between. And also they really thrive in disturbed areas where pigs are. And it blankets understories. It absolutely converts understories of forest, which were once completely native, and the ginger comes in and shades everything out. All right, and next slide. You can quickly dominate landscapes. I think we've touched on that. And yeah, it just converts everything. You know, it converts something that was very biodiverse. There's lots of native species, and then basically the whole understory just becomes one species of non-native ginger. All right, and one way that we prevent ginger from spreading is doing removal methods using herbicide. It's very labor intensive. A lot of times when you're in the forest doing this kind of work, you're cutting the stems and you're treating each individual stem with a light cocktail of escort herbicide. And sometimes, like the photo on the right, you can expose native species that are still trying to hang on, like this Ia vine that was hiding amongst this huge patch of ginger. I believe that Mahina went and, you know, got wild hair to just go in there and get rid of this patch of ginger because she knew about the Ia in the area, and that's one of her favorite species. And next slide, please. So this photo is of a unit out in Kohala that's been fenced since 2004. On the left side of the fence, that's within the unit. On the right side of the fence, that's outside. And when we fenced this unit off, it's only about a 9 to 10 acre unit. When we fenced this unit off, it was 100% pig inhabited. There was pigs everywhere up there. And once it's fenced, the native forest really started bouncing back on it by itself. Now you go in there, and I went in there the other day after not being there for many years, and I was absolutely blown away. It was astounding the amount of native vegetation in there, the abundance of native species and biodiversity. It was really hard to walk through because I didn't want to misstep, you know, I didn't want to make one wrong move. But outside of the fence, as you can see, the pig disturbance is continuing and even worsening. You know, a lot more soil getting exposed, and oftentimes weed species starting there. And I've actually gone and pulled banana poco around that unit and haven't had to do that within the unit. But basically that's what we're kind of hoping for at the Eke unit, is we want to have a larger area that really captures the same things that is happening in this smaller unit of Kilohana unit up on the mountain. So anyway, I think next slide is Mahina's.
Okay, and I do want to add that the area on the right in this photo is Eke. So you can see that even though, as I said earlier, it contains some of the highest quality forests remaining, all of the pictures, most of the pictures that you folks have been seeing today were taken at Eke, including the photos of pig damage in many of the photos that involve the water and the wallows. And so again, I just want to make sure that we understand that degradation is actively happening at Eke. And so with that, we'll end on a positive note. What are we going to do? We have this beautiful place that provides us with life and water, and is being threatened by non-native species. And so these are our stewardship practices that we plan to carry out, including enclosing the 540-acre area with a pig-proof fence, with the outcome of 540 acres of cloud forest being protected from pigs. and also collaboratively developing and implementing a 5-year pig removal plan and removing feral pigs towards 100% removal, and similarly removing Himalayan ginger towards 100% removal. And also, we are really excited to monitor our impact. This is, at least for me and Jake, as well as many of us at the Kohala Center, the first time that we get to really start a project and carry it out. And so we have a big monitoring plan that we plan to carry out. That'll include practicing kilo or observation, conducting water quality, vegetation, bird, and pig surveys. And what we hope to see is increased native plant abundance and biodiversity, like we saw in the previous photo, and reduced sediment load in streams. And then finally, like we are doing right now this evening, we will share our work, learning and journey with the Kohala community, our partners and funders, with the goal of increasing knowledge, understanding, and stewardship of Kohala's cloud forests. And so with that, we'd like to say mahalo to our partners and funders, and mahalo to South Kohala Coastal Partnership for the opportunity to share about our work, as well as mahalo to all of you who chose to spend your evening with us. And so I think at this time we can ask if there are any questions. And perhaps before we jump to that, please contact us if you have questions, feedback, or ideas. Our emails are here. We are doing community outreach for this project, which this presentation is absolutely a part of. And we're hosting both individual and group talk story sessions. So if you're interested in participating and giving your feedback and being a part of the stewardship of this place, please do reach out to us. And so maybe I'll pass it over to Blair to see if there are any questions.
Mahalo, everyone.
Thank you, Mahina, and thank you, Jake. What a beautiful presentation. I feel like very happy now after seeing all your pictures. Yeah, just very beautiful pictures, and thank you. It was a very nice, well thought out presentation. I haven't seen any unanswered questions in the chat, but I'd like to open the floor to anyone who has a question on their mind. Just go ahead and unmute yourself, or feel free to stick it in the chat as well.
I see one question from Julia. Summer internship for high school students. We have done a variety of youth programs over the years, or a lot of community education and stewardship initiatives over the years. And of course, those change over time. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to read your question. So right now we just have one intern, who I mentioned earlier, Ho'oipo Bertelman. But that's, I think, an aspect of our work that we're really hoping to grow, especially because this project area, a lot of our project areas are on the backside or the windward side of Kohala. And so this project is not, it's a place that is more easily accessible, and a place that perhaps we can involve the community in a deeper way with the stewardship, including high school students. We do field trips with high schoolers. I have a field trip with HPA in a couple of weeks with their senior capstone students. And we also have, currently what we're offering is our community stewardship days, or our Ho'aina days. And those are taking place at a different project area because largely due to COVID, we're not able to offer transportation. But we do hope to be able to do stewardship days at Eke. But right now, those events are happening quarterly at Kauai Corridor and the Kauai Tree Sanctuary. Which is actually right next to and right below Eke.
This is Julia. I'm the one who asked the question. And just an additional my son was one of the interns back under,
Awesome.
yeah, so, and not only did it help the land, and he did get to fly back in the helicopter and stay in the cabins and that sort of thing. It was really great for him to focus his desire to work on the land and stuff. But also it was huge for his for applying to colleges and job interviews and things, just that. So you get, it's kind of a double benefit in that they get to give back to the land. They get to have all these experiences that they may not otherwise ever be able to have, but also then it looks really good for their future as well.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. I'm fortunate to, when I started at the Kohala Center, I've been there for about 5 years now. I've had some high school interns, and I'm amazed at where they're at today. And so happy to have been a part of their many experiences that shape them. So thank you so much for sharing about your son. I'm so glad to hear that.
Thank you for providing all that.
I think I saw another question. What inspired the name of Eke? That's a great question, Avalon. Avalon has been to many of our Hawaiiana days. It's so nice to see that you're here. So Eke, I should have mentioned that. So many of the photos that you saw in the first section that were kind of describing Hemela no Kane were taken of the Eke project area. And so one of the pu'us there on those photos is Pu'u Eke. And so that's where the name for the area has come from. I think that, I think it would be wonderful if we if the traditional ancestral name of that place would reveal itself to us at some point. I've heard many of our hunters in our community refer to that area as Kwaihae Uka. And so that's a name that I'm excited to investigate further. But right now we've named our project after one of the significant pu'us that we will be protecting.
Mahalo, Mahina.
Mahalo. I think Scott has a question.
Mahina and Jake, thank you. It's more just mahalo nui, like that's it. Thank you very much. This has been a wonderful time to rejuvenate my evening, and thank you for your being here and sharing. And you know, I was wondering with Valakua and kind of the human driven, traditionally speaking, like you said, 500,000 years ago with the Kohala Mountain arising, and then 800 to 1,000 years ago, humans being there, you know, obviously Kanaka have had a major influence. And at the Val Kanaka, you know, how do you guys see sort of or this is a loaded question, but it's okay, just say, no, I'm not answering that. But leeward and windward, you know, on Kohala, how would you see sort of us embracing old ways of sustainable pathways into the future in the Val Kanaka?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jake.
I'll give you my look into it, but this is strictly my perspective. I think first and foremost, Val Kanaka can't survive without a healthy Valakua, because there's so much that comes from Valakua. And after you secure that, I think that responsible use of land, you know, trying to make a situation that seems to be thriving, maybe, I think that you can make it thrive better and be more healthy. And I guess the first thing that comes to mind is ranch land. there's a lot of ranch land, and Hawaii is a pretty small place. And the amount of ranch land that we have is pretty huge. I think that, and like I said, this is only an opinion from me, not from the Kohala Center. I think we do value our ranch lands, absolutely, but I think that a lot of it is outweighing the amount of other agriculture that we could be doing, whether that's food crops or food forests or just more forest. You know, that's my perspective, and I really hope I don't offend anyone or any ranchers. I do love to eat my beef burgers every once in a while, and I have a lot of friends that are ranchers, and so yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I think I'll maybe add one thing that struck me in my research for this presentation is that idea of this constant seeking of balance, thanks Blair, between the vowel akua and the vowel kanaka. But I think that that's also true within those places as well. I was excited to see in the previous presentation about Kwai Hai from Willie and Carolyn that there's that these riparian corridors have been identified for kind of bringing the forest down the mountain and also protecting the streams that have already naturally protected the vegetation that we have left. I grew up ranching in Waimea here and there, and I am still a aspiring Wahine Hololeo today, a horseback rider. And so it is a place that a practice that is near and dear to my heart, but so is our native forest. And so I often wonder what it would be like to seek balance between our forests, our streams, and our ranch land. And I think that has already that work has already begun with our riparian corridors, as well as the many partnerships between the ranchers of the Kohala Watershed Partnership.
Sorry to put you on the spot. I didn't mean to. Just beautiful. In fact, I'm just going to send this one out, just tapping away. But thank you so much for sharing tonight, and those responses I think are profoundly important. Thank you.
Mahalo, Scott.
Mahalo.
And I appreciate all of your feedback about the photos. That is a part of the way that we capture our kilo or our observations. And because of our field trip last Friday to Kilohana that Jake had mentioned, we thought that it would be really impactful and powerful to kind of share the story of our forest and our work through photos with you all. So thank you guys for appreciating that.
Thank you guys so much. Do we have any, we've got a minute left on the clock. Any last thoughts, questions? Well, thank you guys so much. I put the link to the speaker series videos on the South Kohala Coastal Partnership's website. So as the rest of the series unfolds, those videos will be uploaded onto that link. So feel free to go there and visit previous presentations and check it out throughout the rest of the year and next year for upcoming presentations. And thank you so much, Jake and Mahina. That was such a beautiful presentation. I love the questions at the end. It's always good to chat with our listeners afterwards. So yeah, I just can't say thank you enough. And with that, I'll hang out for a couple minutes. So feel free to hang around and ask more questions or get back to your evening, and thanks again.